let's start with the side that says air concepts that students have trouble with on practice tests. I'm not super worried about you guys. Several of these I've kind of adjusted my teaching to once I figured them out. This is just stuff I've seen from data on practice tests that students tend to forget or miss. So number one, basically, you forget, you tend to think that different cell types, like in your own body or in other multicellular organisms, have different DNA. They don't. They all have the same DNA. Every cell in your body has the exact same full set, diploid set of DNA. It's just that different kinds of cells in your body have different genes turned on at any one time, right? You've got the whole set in every cell. You're just not using it all, right? You're using different parts of your DNA, which is why we could clone you, right? You could take any cell and clone someone from that one cell. They've all got the identical set. Number two, protein synthesis and gene expression both mean the same thing. And what they mean is transcription, which is making mRNA from DNA in the nucleus, and then translation, which is taking all three kinds of RNA and stringing amino acids together to make a protein. That's what protein synthesis and gene expression both mean. Number three, small populations act weird in evolution. As soon as a population is small enough, things start to happen. Change starts to happen because of genetic drift, which is different from like natural selection. It's just, it's such a small population that it's not going to be very diverse. Change is going to happen just because of births and deaths, that kind of thing. Number four, you know about logistics, right? That it overshoots carrying capacity and tends to bounce. We've done that to death, I think. Number five, students don't think of cells as normally having cell walls. And that's just because ours don't, right? Animal cells do not have cell walls. That's true. Every other kind of cell on the planet does. Plants do, fungi do, both kinds of bacteria do, most protists do. So cell walls are kind of the norm. It's animals that break that norm. Number six, sex linked doesn't mean just males, right? Sex linked can mean mostly males in the case of baldness and hemophilia and stuff like that. But there's going to be females that have it too. There's just not as many. Number seven, this is an important one because we've talked a lot about how big things can't diffuse across the cell membrane, like in Beaker problems, right? Like proteins can't get through, sugar can't get through. But the other thing that's true, and it's because of those nonpolar tails on the phospholipids, they don't like charged things to touch them, right? They don't like polar things to touch them, and that includes charged ions. So things like sodium ions, chloride ions, anything with a positive or a negative charge doesn't automatically diffuse across the cell membrane. It needs a channel or a pump to help it. And that came up in that one practice test. Number eight, if they give you DNA and ask you to use a secret decoder wheel of some sort, they will probably expect you to transcribe before you use the code, right? In other words, if it's DNA, you're going to have to take it one step and match C's to G's and G's to C's and T's to A's and A's to U's to get mRNA to even use that term, right? And finally, and I've done that to death and acted like an idiot to try to bring home that you can't just learn something and evolve, right? You can't just try real hard and evolve. You got to already have the mutation in your DNA and survive better and have more babies or die. That's kind of how evolution works. Any questions about those? I think most of them are pretty basic to you by now, but those are problems that I see in practice tests. Good. Now the important part, which is standardized testing, because this is not your first standardized test. It will not be your last. It's a pretty good life skill to be able to do better on standardized tests than you should, right? To kind of know the tricks so that your scores are maybe even a little better than what you actually know, right? So here are some things to remember. First of all, standardized testing is a business. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry. That's why we're having state tests this year. It's not fair. It's not fair to the students that were at home, the whole year and that haven't gotten good instruction. Why would we test all of them? Well, because these companies have to make their money. Their job is to tell the state or the colleges in this country, or depending on what test you're talking about, who's better than who knew more than who they should accept and who they should keep out, who should graduate. They can't do that job if a bunch of kids get 100. So for that reason, on every standardized test you take, there's going to be questions that you don't know. And that's normal. Don't get freaked out by those questions. They put them in there on purpose, so only that one kid gets them. So they can tell, hey, that one kid got that question right. He's super amazing. You don't have to be that kid, right? You just got to do well. And you can do that without, nailing the 3 questions that are too hard for anybody. Okay? So don't be discouraged by a few super hard questions. They're there for a reason. You don't have to worry about them. Also, don't get discouraged by questions that suck. There's going to be questions that suck, especially on the state tests, because what they're doing is field testing those questions to see if they suck. Some of those are just downright wrong. They make me insane when I hear about them, but don't worry about it. They'll probably get thrown out. Okay. That's also, if you thought some of the practice test questions were weird, that's why, because they only release the questions they don't want to use. Okay. Part of what standardized means, number 3, is that if it's real hard and everybody in the state does poorly, the score you need to get a 5 or a 4 on it goes down. Right? The harder it is, the worse the students in Ohio do, the easier it is to pass. Right? The lower the score you need to pass is. That's part of what standardized means. So if you think it's the hardest test you ever took, chances are you're gonna need like a 58% to pass it. So as far as specific mechanical strategies go, I don't put a lot of stock in most of them. The one that I know works, and it can work for pretty much anyone, is the strategy of not, when you get to a question and you're like, oh my God, this is really hard, this might take me 10 minutes, mark it to come back to and skip it. Get through all the ones that you have a reasonable chance of getting right in a reasonable amount of time. Go through all of those, mark all the ones that you don't. Mark all the ones that look like they're going to take you more than a couple minutes. That way, you spend all of the time where you're like relaxed and you have enough time. You spend all that time working on the ones you have the most chance of getting points at, right? You save all the ones for the end that you have the least chance of getting points at. That is a winning strategy. And then you can take as much time as you want, kind of going through each of those, deciding which ones of those you have the most chance of getting right. Focus on those first. It's a process of elimination. Does that make sense to everybody? Because that really is the best strategy I know for standardized tests. Number 5, answer everything. You probably know this already. There used to be standardized tests where you got penalized for answering something wrong more than you got penalized for not answering it at all. I believe that is no longer the case in any of them, but certainly not in tomorrow's test and not in the ACT. Okay, answer everything. Also, some of the drag and drop questions that Ohio seems to love in science, it's pretty darn easy to get like 1 out of the 2 points on it. So if you really don't know it, just drag and drop, right? Just do something random, or do the one part you do know is right, and Hail Mary the other part. But like some of them, a monkey could get half credit on. Number 6, if there's an extended response on any kind of standardized test, I don't know if there will be tomorrow, but don't irritate the retired grumpy graders that they hire to grade these things. Don't restate the question 5 times. Don't do your space filler tricks from English class. Don't do any of that. Bullet points are great. We love bullet points. Now, that said, the way they generally grade them is with a bulleted list where they're like, I'm looking for the things I'm looking for. And they don't care if there's a couple things that aren't correct, as long as the stuff that is correct is there. So there's no reason not to put everything you know down. Just don't waste any of their time with stuff that's really not relevant. Okay. Number 7, don't panic. Fear is great if it makes you watch the time closely, pace yourself, and have a little adrenaline going so you're a little bit smarter. That's great. Panic is bad. Okay, you don't need to panic. First of all, this test isn't that important. I'm sorry, I know, it feels like it, but it can only help you, right? It can help you get your SEALs or whatever you need to graduate. It looks good if you do well, but it's not going to break you if you do poorly. So don't panic. Just get every point that you can out of it, and you're good. It's really true what I wrote here, that I have felt stupid, real stupid, coming out of every standardized test I've ever taken. I did well on all of them. How you feel coming out of it, how you feel in the middle of it, isn't necessarily reflective of how you're going to do. Remember that there's a lot that goes into grading these and standardizing them and adjusting them. You will probably do better than you thought. You're ready. I mean, we have covered everything we need to cover. You have done a great job keeping up. My students generally do extremely well on this test. You are going to be great. Okay? Don't stress about it. End of pep talk. That is all we are going to discuss about the state test. Doesn't that feel good? I am going to give you an assignment, but it's not due till Friday. Yes, Lauren. Good question. I will put that up for you. That's the room. So you are in B212 with Mr. Rao and Ms. Brustowski. Here is the chapter 20 guided reading due Friday. We are beginning our disease unit.